Patrick Bet-David has been in the news recently, basically talking extensively about what it is that's happening with Andrew Tate. But Patrick Bet-David decided that he wanted to go down another path with George Soros. Now, a lot of people are unfamiliar with George Soros, but this is the Millionaire Morning Show, and so we have to inform you and keep you up to date on what's going on, because everything comes back down to the money. Even when we talking about Suki Hana, even when we talking about YK Osiris, even when we talking about our own personal issues and problems, it all comes back to the money. If you guys have not hit a like for the YouTube algorithm right now, it is more than 1,300 people in here, and the likes are very, very anemic. Please don't make me go to a commercial. I want to share with you the thoughts of what Patrick Bet-David had to say with regard to George Soros or Soros. Make sure y'all hit a like for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let's get it popping.
I want to read you an article from LA Times. It says October of 2004. The title of the article is George Soros, the God who carries around some dangerous demons. Here's what he says in the interview. He says, I fancied myself as some kind of God. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble.
The question that I have for y'all as we go through a lot of these conversations, right? Because I explained to y'all a long time ago that when you get to certain levels and when you get in certain rooms, you can feel the energy and the spirit from certain things. And when I say you can feel the energy and the spirit from certain things, it don't matter if they got money, but if they got money, it just seems to be a lot more pronounced as far as that energy and that spirit. And the things that I'm having conversations about nowadays is principalities and not just the bag. And this is why it's so important to have character. This is why it's so important for you to align yourself with the right group of people. This is why it's so important for you to be situationally aware, because you don't want to do anything for the bag. You want to become the best version of yourself, understanding that the money comes along with it. It said, if truth be known, I carried some rather potent, keyword potent, messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I thought I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble. Let's continue.
Had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble. It is a sort of disease when you consider yourself some kind of God, the creator of everything. Are you ready? Here's how he finishes it. But I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out. Today, we're going to learn more about George Soros. Get right into it. Why do we need to learn about this man named George Soros, who's 92 years old? Why would you be intimidated by this guy? So what if he's made somewhere between $50 to $70 billion in his career?
$70 billion is allegedly around what his net worth is. $70 billion. Thank you to Money Mix. I'm definitely going to be reading that super chat shortly. $70 billion. As we go through this, I want y'all to ask yourself a question. And the question that I want y'all to ask yourself is it possible to become a deca billionaire? Not deca millionaire, but a deca billionaire, without at some point making some sacrifices or doing some egregious shit along the way?
And currently his net worth is $7 billion. Yeah, he's given $32 billion to different organizations such as Open Society Organization and some others. Yeah, he's supported a lot of different presidents, a lot of different candidates, a lot of different people. Why are people so scared of him? Is this guy a puppet master? Is he evil? Is he a good person? Is he a bad person? Is he a humanitarian? Maybe he's just a father. Maybe he just wants to support some cause. Why are you so worried about him? All of those are great questions. Today, we're going to study his childhood, upbringing as an adult, how he became an investor where he made all the money, Karl Popper, who is this Karl Popper guy, and who he's given money to over the years. Let's get right into it. All right, so he was born August 1930 in Budapest, Hungary, originally named Georgi Schwartz, but his father later changed the family surname to Soros, a more Hungarian-sounding name to protect them from increasing anti-Semitic sentiment in Hungary. His father, Tiba.
Now, why is it so important, and why is George Soros in the news so much lately? Anybody that's been paying attention to what's going on financially in the news and so on and so forth, George Soros's millennial son, Now remember, this guy is above 90 years old. He controls a hedge fund allegedly worth over $25 billion, net worth above $7 billion, has made over $70 billion in his lifetime allegedly. And his son is now taking over the throne and is in charge of the $25 billion hedge fund. Y'all want to see what his son looks like? Here, I'm going to show you what his son looks like. I'm going to show you what the son looks like. That's what the son looks like. His son, his millennial son, is now in charge of the $25 billion hedge fund that George Soros has allegedly built. Okay, let's continue.
Salvador was a lawyer and a passionate promoter of Esperanto, an artificial language created in the late 19th century intended to foster harmony between people from different cultures. His father's decision to teach Esperanto was an early indication of commitment to an open-mindedness and understanding of different cultures that George would carry into his later life. George Soros was 14 during the Nazi occupation of Hungary in 1944. His father secured false identities for the family, identifying themselves as Christians. George Soros was tasked with being a courier who helped Nazis identify Jews and confiscate their property. And in a 1998 60-minute interview, he was asked if this was a traumatizing experience, and this is how he responded.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all.
So in his childhood, he was basically a part of and mentored by and subjected to the idea that he had to go out and participate in the confiscation of different things with regard to the Nazis, especially as it was occupied in Germany, right? And they asked him, is this a traumatizing experience, the things that you had to do and be subjected to as a result of it? And he said, no, it wasn't hard at all. Not particularly. What people don't understand is that I think that the business world is way more gangster and cutthroat than what it is that y'all have seen on the streets. The business world and the people that usually rise to the top, you have to have a way about you that allows for you to be able to operate a certain type of way, because you don't know what it is that you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to make some sacrifices along the way that allows for you to even become more successful. You have to remove a part of yourself and just become a savage. And I think that that's one of the reasons why he's become so successful as a result of it.
So a lot of people who didn't know who George Soros was, they watched this interview and they said, this guy sounds like a sociopath. How could you say something like that? Some others said, well, maybe he was numb as a 14.
They say most CEOs are sociopaths. Most millionaires, guys that usually rise to the top, and even women that rise to the top, they say that they're narcissists and they're sociopaths. The best, I read an article one time and it said that the best position for somebody that is a sociopath is a CEO, or did they say a doctor? And there was a few other positions, but they say sociopaths are best suited to become leaders within great companies and continue to drive profitability.
15-year-old, imagine you're going through it and you see stuff like that. By the way, at the same time when this is taking place, he had another traumatic experience. Two of the liberators that were helping them out, Russian liberators, they raped his mother, and his mother talked about it. So this kid, all this pain, all this anger, all this frustration, all these experiences, all happening at the same time. You have to live a fake life so they don't kill you, act like you're a Christian, help the Nazis, find Jews, your mom's going through this, you're working with Russians, all of that together at a young age. What does that do to you? So now let's look at George Soros as a young adult.
It makes you a CEO.
After the war, Hungary fell under the communist rule. In 1947, Soros left Hungary for England. He worked as a waiter and a railway porter to support his studies at the London School of Economics. During this time, he meets the man that had the most influence in his life. This is according to his words, Karl Popper. Now, who is Karl Popper? Karl Popper was a philosopher of science and epistemologist, best known for his principle of falsifiability. So what did Karl Popper really believe in? These are some of the philosophies that he had. Number one, falsifiability. He proposed that for a theory to be considered scientific, it must be potentially falsifiable. This means there must be a potential observation or experiment that could prove the theory false. Number two, the principle of falsifiability was designed to solve the demarcation problem, the problem of distinguishing between science and non-science or pseudoscience. Number three, critique of historicism. He argued against the idea that history unfolds according to predictable laws or patterns. He promoted the idea that human actions can significantly influence the course of history. Four, open society is what he believed in, which, by the way, later on, Soros starts a foundation called Open Society Foundation. Here's what open society means to Karl Popper. The open society and its enemies. Popper defended liberal democracy and criticized totalitarianism. He depicted democratic societies as open, self-correcting systems. And last point, influence and critique. While Popper's philosophy has been influential, it has been subject to debate and critique. Despite this, he remains one of the most widely read philosophers of the 20th century. So those were his philosophies, Karl Popper, but this is how he influenced George Soros. So number one was the philosophy of open society. Keep in mind, this is in the late 40s, early 50s. Instead of promoting totalitarian regimes such as communism and fascism, it was about replacing it with individual freedom, democratic governance, and a flexible, changing social and economic structure. This is what he wanted to do. Number two, fallibilism, the belief that all knowledge is tentative, provisional, and subject to revision in light of new evidence. This influenced Soros' investment strategy, and he always talks about the fact that he was ready to adjust his positions if the facts changed. Number three is critical thinking. So Soros adopted this in his investment strategy, where he was often willing to go against conventional wisdom, but also in his philanthropic activities, encouraging open debate and discussion. And last but not least, humanitarian efforts. This has significantly influenced Soros' philanthropic efforts, which has focused on civil society, education, and human rights around the globe. Or at least that's what he claims to focus on. So while he's getting clear on his philosophies, he's picking up from Karl Popper. At the same time, Europe is in shambles. The Marshall Plan is being executed from U.S. by George Marshall, Secretary of State. They're sending $13 to $15 billion to Europe in fuel, food, different ways to help out. He's seeing this, saying there may be a need for a global Marshall Plan. I'd love to be a part of that. That also kind of inspired him a little bit. So we just learned a little bit about his childhood, adulthood, and how his philosophies are getting clear. Now let's look at how he does in finance. So let me put it to you this way. From 1970 till 2000, if you had to throw names out there on who are the best money managers, you would find the name Buffett, you would find the name Soros, and later on you would find the name Dalio. From 1970.
And I love Ray Dalio and I love Warren Buffett, but we'll get to that shortly. I want to get to a point that he's about to make.
To 2000, he starts a fund called Quantum Fund. It's still around, but during that period, average annual rate of return, 30%. And he has.
Now, do you know how difficult it is to get a rate of return, an average annual rate of return of 30% over a 30-year period from 1970 to 2000? Also famously made a $1 billion profit in a single day in 1992 by short selling the British pound. Now, I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I do understand in order for you to get that type of leg up, you have to have some really good connections and you really have to have some understanding of what the hell is happening on the back end. Nobody gets that lucky. Nobody is that smart. Nobody can get you an annual rate of return of 30% over 30 years. That's insane. That is absolutely insane, family. That's crazy. Whew. You know how crazy that is? You know how hard it is to get an annual rate of return of 10% on your portfolio every single year, let alone for 30 years straight?
Average annual rate of return, 30%. And he had some years that was 60+%. every year. And of course, it helped in many cases when these guys were operating on offshore laws, not having to abide by SEC, U.S. tax code, all the stuff that we had going on here. That is a form of an edge that he had. But at the same time, he was either the best or one of the top 3 best during his time. So now, Soros had 2 things when it came out to his investment philosophy. One of it was fallibility, and the other one was reflexivity. Let's look at both. Number one, the theory of fallibility is a concept stemmed from the philosophical understanding that it's impossible to achieve perfect knowledge. In other words, humans are inherently flawed in their understanding and judgment. The theory is mainly used to explain the limitations of human comprehension and decision-making in complex systems like economics. This fallibility is often magnified by cognitive biases, incomplete information, and the emotions of the individual. And the second theory was the theory of reflexivity. And here's
Now, why does that theory matter? Because a lot of people will hear that and then they will just completely overlook it and they don't really understand how that's applied. Basically, he's depending on the failure or the inability of humans to be able to remain perfect in order to capitalize off of it from a financial perspective. He understands that people are emotional, people are fallible, people are willing to make decisions or do things that are irrational that you can often profit from. I'll give you an example of that, right? There's a lot of people that are willing to move down to a specific area or space like Florida at a time where you can't even get home insurance, right? Unless you go through a specific lender. There's only one person that continues to stick around, or not even one person, one company that continues to stick around in Florida. However, they are convinced that this is a great long-term investment as far as the real estate market down there. Not short-term investment, not mid-term investment, but long-term investment. They're absolutely 100% convinced that this is a great long-term investment, right? So it doesn't matter about what the data and the statistics says. Now we're then also factoring into that the idea that humans are fallible, meaning that they're irrational. They're willing to make emotional decisions that then other people then capitalize off of. Want me to give you a smaller example of that? Toilet paper. Remember when the pandemic, when everybody lost their fucking minds and everybody went in and they was willing to pay an egregious amount for toilet paper? Well, guess what? One of the ways in which I was able to profit during the pandemic is that I had a lot of stocked up supplies and things like that we then capitalized off of, and we moved a lot of it. We had toilet paper, we had paper towel, we had all of that type of stuff stocked up in the basement, and we made an egregious amount of money. And you know why? Because people are emotional and they're willing to panic, and usually you can capitalize off of that. You basically capitalize off of other people's stupidity. And so when I warn y'all and I say it's a recession coming or this is about to happen and you need to prepare yourselves, or the majority of the resources and the money is made during the recession, or when everybody else is gnashing at the teeth, or when people making irrational decisions, it happens every single day. Every single day.
And the second theory was the theory of reflexivity. And here's what reflexivity is. It's the idea that people's perception and beliefs influence their decision making, which in turn impacts the state of the world, changing the fundamentals that they are trying to understand. This then further alters their perceptions and beliefs, creating...
You will be surprised how much money we made off of toilet paper, bro. Selling toilet paper online during that time, or I'll give you another one, hand sanitizer. We made so much money off of... You don't believe it. You don't believe it. You don't believe it.
Hello, my love.
What's happening? Hey, do you remember when the pandemic first hit?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember all of the stuff that I had stockpiled in the basement before the pandemic hit, before everything went crazy?
Yep.
What do you remember me moving online?
Paper towel and toilet paper, right?
And hand sanitizer.
Yep, I forgot about that.
People were idiots. They literally were idiots. And I was like, hey, Rita, it's the perfect time to go ahead and move all of this stuff.
Yep. They was paying a lot of money for it.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye.
You'll be surprised how much money we made off of fucking hand sanitizer. People were willing to jump off the fucking cliff for some hand sanitizer. I'm talking about thousands of % in markup for hand sanitizer. Crazy. But let's continue.
A continuous reflexive feedback loop. He openly talks about how he used some of these philosophies to actually manipulate the markets in his favor and make billions of dollars. We'll look at a couple of the times he did this, but he said this once in his book. This is what makes propaganda so effective, because the complexity of the world we live in exceeds our ability to understand it. Confronted by a reality of extreme complexity, we are obligated to resort to various methods of simplification. Pretty wild, sharp, shrewd, you can call a lot of different names, but here's how we use those philosophies to make billions. Number one, the British pound in 1992. This is the most famous example George Soros used to influence the market by betting against the British pound in 92. He believed that the pound was overvalued and that the British government would have to devalue the currency. He was proven right when the British government was forced to withdraw the pound from the European exchange rate mechanism.
Now, the interesting thing about that, though, he bet $10 billion and made a profit of $1 billion from this trade. Nobody just bets this money and then they just automatically just profit. They have to see it happening before it happens. So there's multiple different factors, similar to what happened in 2008. If you go and read The Big Short, you understand that there were people, and you can start to use these strategies in order to understand exactly how it is that other people make money off of other people making mistakes, right? At the time in 2007, 2006, 2005, 2004, the economy was being propped up with fake money and the idea of home ownership. So much so to where they were putting together what you would call tranches. And tranches it was like a collection of different mortgages all packaged into one. It was bad shit, good shit. And then largely what happened is they packaged the bad shit with the good shit, and then they moved it at a much higher rate. And the fact that people got relaxed and lazy and start capitalizing off of the idea that you didn't even have to have a good job or good credit in order to get these loans, then seen an opportunity for people to then bet against the housing market, in which most people, because of how it was that they've been trained since they came up, would never bet against the housing market, because the housing market had never crashed at that point up to it in those people's lifetimes. And so when you see some inconsistencies in a marketplace, usually that's an opportunity that comes along with somebody that's really willing to put up big money as a result of it. The only problem with that is you then have to contend with other people who are incredibly invested in seeing that system continue to take place. Do you have the wherewithal to endure in that market long enough to actually get to the profitability? And you have to have some really good information to be able to make those decisions.
Soros bet $10 billion and made a profit of $1 billion from this trade, nicknamed the man who broke the Bank of England. According to the Shadow Party book, Soros admits that this bet was taking money out of the pockets of British taxpayer, but says, if I had taken social consequence into account, it would have thrown off my risk-reward calculation and profit.
If he had taken and this is the part that makes you a savage, that then allows for you to really, really be able to become incredibly profitable, right? Because where other people, similar to 2008, would say, well, look how many people had to lose their home or how many people lost their homes, but then you're profiting off of people losing their homes by betting against the housing market. You got to remove that conscious. You got to remove that bias. You got to remove that whole human element in order to still make the money that you're going to make, because in their mind, the housing market is going to go bust anyway. And so what he's saying is that, listen, the banks at that time was too big to fail, or the taxpayers are then going to be the ones that actually have to suffer as a result of it. But in order for me to do that, I would have to remove my conscience of how that's affecting other people in order to continue to take that risk reward calculation. Meaning, somebody is going to suffer and somebody is going to get rich. It might as well be me. When they sell y'all cigarettes, and they've been selling y'all cigarettes for an extended period of time, when they sold y'all perks, when they dealt with the opioid crisis, when we had the banking crisis, when we had the housing crisis, when they said that the banks was too big to fail, when we seen the pandemic play out and things like that, somebody is going to suffer and somebody is going to get really, 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 really rich as a result of it. The question then becomes, are you willing to continue to go through with it even though you know there's going to be suffering and gnashing of the teeth as a result of it? And that's what we having a conversation about right here, which is one of the reasons why rich people are some of the most feared people on the face of the earth, because they understand. We seeing it take place right now, and I'm going to tell you what the next frontier is. Artificial intelligence, Neuralink, all of these type of things, right? We see it playing out right before our eyes right now. We've had the movies for years that show you that artificial intelligence is going to replace people's jobs, is going to absolutely ruin society. Eventually, it'll probably become so smart that it'll completely kill people and protect people against themselves in order to preserve you. We've seen everything play out. We know this story. We know exactly what's going to happen. We knew it with regard to how it is that we're polluting the earth. We know our oceans is fucked up. We know about the fact that farming animals for human consumption is going to absolutely continue to decimate what it is that we got going on in society, because it put way more CO2 into the air. Farming animals for human consumption is the biggest contributor to global warming or the warming of the earth. That is a fact. We know this. We know that we depend on fossil fuels. We don't give a fuck. You know why? Because it's going to make our lives more convenient right now. We know that we have a national debt. We know that we have over $31 trillion in national debt. You know what they're going to do? They're going to continue to raise the debt ceiling. We know that we standing on a house of cards. You know that the area that you live in is absolutely going to be decimated. We know everything that's going to happen exactly before it happens. But the reality is that we're willing to profit from it short term, and hopefully we can profit from it long term, understanding that. And then we train ourselves to say that, well, humans is going to destroy each other anyway, or artificial intelligence is going to continue to go forward anyway. So I might as well profit from it instead of competing against it, because even though I know that this is not necessarily the best thing for society at the time, or we don't truly understand it, somebody's going to profit from it. So it might as well be me. And that's how people justify it in their minds, that they're going to continue to do whatever it is that they're doing.
Would have been refused. Can you imagine thinking that way? It's pretty wild. I'm going to give you 4 other examples where it'll validate his reflexivity or his fallibility philosophy. The second one would be the German Deutschmark in 1993. He wrote a letter to the Times of London stating that he expected the mark to fall against all major currencies, which immediately triggered panic selling. Again, this is
There's never a better opportunity to capitalize than when people panic. When people panic, that's how you capitalize. Most of the time, that's how people get really, really rich, is when everybody else panics.
The next one, Asian financial crisis in 1997. During the Asian financial crisis, Soros investment activities were blamed by some for exasperating the crisis. Malaysia's then Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad accused Soros of destabilizing regional economies through currency speculation. Then he also did something similar in Russia. The Russian ruble, 1998. He told Financial Times of London that Russia should devalue the ruble by 15 to 25%, causing widespread panic selling. And the last example, here's the dollar in 2004. Soros announced a short position against the dollar on CNN at a time when the dollar had been quickly declining against the euro, pushing the dollar down even further. So this was his way of...
Yes, Bay Anthony, he allegedly manipulates markets. He's not predicting panic. He sees panic, and then he pushes panic further into what it is that he predicts is going to happen anyway. That's the key. You identify the anomaly, you identify the problem, and then you have enough money to advocate for it or against it. Remember when the Bitcoins and all of these cryptocurrencies and all of these influencers were then starting to put together coins and all of this other type of stuff? I'll do you one better. Remember GameStop? Y'all remember what was going on with GameStop? Remember with the manipulation of the market? Remember what was happening with GameStop and Robinhood and all of this other type of stuff? Y'all remember that? Of course we knew that GameStop was trash. All the fundamentals says that GameStop is absolutely garbage. All of the fundamentals says that GameStop is absolutely garbage, right? But we were able to, they were able to manipulate the market that allowed for them to profit immensely as a result by pushing this further, because they understood that it was a lot of shorts against GameStop, because everybody that really understood the market understood that the company was absolutely trash. And so because they identified their anomaly, they were then able to manipulate the market in order to make a whole lot of money, and then they left a bunch of other people holding the bag.
Making money was one of the ways, finding ways to manipulate the market. Now, a lot of other people have done it, but he mastered it, took it to a whole different level. And then eventually in late 70s, when his net worth was $25 million, he says he felt a certain sense of emptiness. And that's where, the political activist in him came out, the philanthropist.
I feel a certain sense of emptiness in the 70s when I was worth $25 million, which is exponentially worth more when you adjust for inflation.
He came out, and many call him the wealthiest political activist of all time. And these are some of the projects he funded. So remember the word Open Society he picked up earlier from Karl Popper. Later on in April of 1993, he starts the Open Society Foundation. And then in 2017, Open Society Foundation announced that Soros had transferred $18 billion of his fortune to Open Society, making it a total of $32 billion he had given to Open Society Foundation since 1984. In case you missed it, one more time, $32 billion. That's $32 billion of his own money. Not, hey, let's go raise money. His own money he put into it. And whether it's through its Open Society Foundation or other ways of giving money, he contributed and influenced media, politics, colleges, universities. So let me just kind of share with you some of the numbers.
Shout out to Heather on Cash App with the 20 ball and Mike, that dude. I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all. I really do appreciate y'all on Cash App.
And I have an idea. And in 2004, Soros spent more than $27 million just to help defeat President Bush. If it's colleges, where Open Society spent $50 million per year to influence colleges. Between 2014 to 2018, Soros donated $184 million.
So when you're looking at this, right, and they saying that, because largely a lot of these people contribute to both sides. Donald Trump historically has contributed to both Democrat and Republican sides during both campaigns. Like during the same year, contributed to both Democrat and Republican sides during the times in which he was really, really leaning into being a businessman and not so much political. If you understand the history of Donald Trump, if you read any of his books, if you've looked at what he's contributed to throughout the years, it's a fact. When you're talking about donating $184 million over this 171 colleges in 51 countries, now you're talking about influence. When you're talking about being philanthropic, you're talking about influence. You're talking about controlling what's going on in society. It's influence. It's called pay to play. For those of you in the back, that's a C student like me. When I get into certain rooms, when I pay to get into certain rooms, when I pay to get into certain dinners, when I contribute to certain presidential campaigns, and I'm able to have, if they do a 10,000 per person seat presidential dinner in order to be able to raise money for this or whatever, so on and so forth, right? When you sit at certain events or you get in the room with certain people, you then have the power to influence what happens in society, which then it filters back into your pocket in other ways because you understand how money works. You then get information that allows for you to then be able to capitalize more effectively than regular everyday people that's just trying to day trade and predict the fucking market. When you get to a certain level, you get more concerned with power and influence than you are with just making money, because then you're controlling and you're manipulating what happens in society.
To 171 colleges in 51 countries. That's 10% of all foundations during that time. They also created...
Because I'm actually just giving the facts. Oh, Anton think this is cool. No, I think that this is the reality. And the only thing that I care about is getting to the truth. This isn't about how I feel. This is about using real life examples and real life people that's being illustrated on this platform in order to inform you so that you can make better decisions. What you do with the information is up to you. The only thing I'm doing is breaking it down from a C student's perspective to help you to understand how the game works. Get out of your feelings. Get out of your feelings and start looking at it objectively so that you can make more informed decisions. Jesus.
Open Society University Network, but he knew one of the ways to influence was to get colleges and universities. And when you give that kind of money, those universities kind of have to listen to what you have to say. Or media. He's had a lifelong fascination with media. He has connections with more than 30 mainstream news outlets, including New York Times, WAPO, Associated Press, CNN, and ABC. Prominent journalists like ABC's Christiane Amanpour, New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson, and former Post editor and now Vice President Len Downey serve on the boards of operations that take Soros cash. A 2011 estimate indicates that media organizations influenced by Soros have a reach of an estimated 300 million people per month.
If that's not power, I don't know what is. If that's not power, I have no clue what is. A 2011, we're not even in 2023 where media is everything. (2011) estimate says that media organizations influenced by Soros reached an estimated 300 million people per month. Not even 300 million people in general, per month. What is the point of having this conversation? I want you to understand that money and how you see money and how you see power and what happens within our society is more than just what it is that you got up as a money phone on your ear. It's the influence. It's the power plays. It's the network. It's the intention. It's your willingness to then capitalize off of other people's pain or understand what other people's pain is so that you can then influence and then capitalize off of it again. You have to start thinking a little bit objectively in order to understand the game. Otherwise, you're not even a part of it. Then you'll be sitting here having conversations talking about how the system is bringing in migrants and what's being advertised on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. And then you'll just be thinking like an imbecile and just reading it for what it is instead of understanding who's behind it and why it is that you need to look at things a little bit more objectively so that you can then either capitalize off of it or just become more informed as a result of it.